Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Work podcast. I'm Kim Scott, co host, here with
Wesley Faulkner, other co host for the Just Work podcast. And we are excited to bring to you a guest, Ellen, who you probably know, but I will let her introduce herself to you. Ellen.
Hi guys, I'm so happy to be here. The last time I saw you, Kim, it was in the throes of COVID on the
yes.
computer, and
Yeah.
now, almost 2 years later, I've got a baby and I'm a mom. So much has happened. I
Congratulations.
thank you.
Parent Parenthood is the best.
It's the best. I thought being a founder was, giving you a run for your money, and then you have a human being, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh damn. This is real. So just in as far as business land goes, parenting and baby aside, I have a company called Hedley and Bennett. I started it 11 years ago as a very, very kind of simple B2B business where I was making made to order aprons. And the whole idea was I wanted to make gear that made people look and feel amazing in the kitchen. I had no investors. I had no business plan. I literally had nothing but myself. And I was like 24. And it is now bloomed into a culinary brand, outfitting hundreds of thousands of chefs and home cooks across the country and thousands of restaurants. But it really started with this tiny idea and bloomed into something so much bigger. So if you're ever watching like Top Chef or Food Network or going into your favorite restaurant and you see a little red patch on the chest of an apron and it has an ampersand, which is the and symbol, that is Hedley and Bennett. So now if you know, you'll see it out there in the world. But that little patch represents 11 years of blood, sweat, and tears of building this thing that represents community, pride, quality, making something very, you could call it basic, very great. And every single product we've expanded from since then, we now do knives, cutting boards, kitchen tools. Every single one of those products is developed with this epic kind of chef community. And since the last time I talked to you, the company is now almost 80% online. So a lot of our consumers are home cooks and people that love cooking, but they don't necessarily have the right gear. And so they'll just go to, the same old places to buy the right gear, air quotes. And we're like, no, guys, we have the pros and we've been outfitting them for 11 years. Like, we're going to make you look legit. So now they come to Hedley and Bennett. So it's been this like wild pivot and journey of going from one thing to the next. And I was 24 when I started it. I'm 35 now. And oh my God, the things I've seen, I just like, is baffling. It's just, I have no words for everything I have seen.
Except you do have a lot of words because you wrote a wonderful book.
Good point, Kim Scott. Good point. I did write a book during COVID while I was pregnant called Dream First, Details Later that breaks down how to quit overthinking and make it happen. Like, so many people get in their own way and don't even start because they're too afraid of what might happen. But I've always been a huge believer that get on the damn road and you're going to learn a lot more than staring at the road and being like, what if this and what if that pothole happens? It's like, what if you go out there and actually jump into that pothole and then you learn how to get out of that pothole and then you just earned a whole bunch of resilience and then you can go do it again and be better at it. So that has always been my life motto for sure.
I've heard so many entrepreneurs say that they wouldn't have started if they knew all the things that took to run a company or to build a brand. And sometimes, there is a burden of knowledge. There's sometimes you just need to just start working and deal with those details later. So I love the theme of your book. And by the way, you said that your stuff is basic. I would call it elemental. It is the building block that you need to get started in order to make something great. So I've been to the website and I say that everything is there. Is just, I don't know if basic would be the word that I would describe it.
It's beautiful.
Well,
is
when
what
we
it is.
started, people thought of aprons as a basic thing, but I completely agree with you. Everything that we make is actually very essential. We use that word internally a lot, and it's just like core, quality, neat, necessary things that you can like build upon to just be a better chef. Like if you look good, you cook good. If you have the right tools, if you have a better knife, like you just show up differently. It's like if you go to a yoga class and some sort of quasi crappy outfit and you don't have a yoga mat and you're just like in the back on a towel, just sloshing around. Like you're not going to do the best job. But if you show up with all the right gear, it definitely kind of elevates you mentally. And I have seen that from day one. It's so wild, Wesley. I don't know if you've ever worn a Hedley Bennett apron, but when I see people put it over their head, like they literally will raise their head and be like, oh, whoa. They're like tying it on. It fits so perfectly because we've developed it with like the best chefs in the country. So every single detail is just right, from like the thickness of the strap to where the pockets lay. So yeah, they're not basic at all. In fact, I call us the Nike of the culinary world because like that's what we're doing. We're outfitting.
You can almost turn it around and use it as a cape. It's so amazing.
Totally.
It's how you feel.
Actually, Bon Appetit said they're like Superman capes for the kitchen. So nailing it. Come work with us, Wesley. You're like part of our PR team. Thank you.
It is funny. When I put mine on, I find my shoulders go back and I feel a little more confident in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You just wait till I send you. We launched Chef's Knives in November last year. I need to send you one. They're so freaking fantastic. They're like super legit. So it's like the extension to the hand. You put the apron on. What comes next? The knife. Then what's next? Yes. The cutting. What's next? The kitchen tool, the pot, the pan, etc. So like that's the next stage of this journey. But like it took us 11 years to get to these other stages. We really spent time deeply like perfecting the apron.
I love it. So if it's okay with you, what I would love to do next is to read a passage from Just Work, which you were so kind in helping me sort of think about as it came out. It was hard to launch a book during COVID, and I've decided to rewrite it. I think it's much better now. So it's going to come out as a paperback soon, called Radical Respect. And so I'd love to read this to you about what we can do as leaders to create a great environment, sort of what I call a BS-free zone, a bias, prejudice, and bullying-free zone. Is that amazing? Are you game for that?
I'm ready. Bring it on, Kim.
All right. And as always, you and Wesley will tell me what I got wrong here. So I'm going to walk the radical candor talk. So I hope you'll help me make it better. All right. For me, the chief joy in being a leader is creating an environment where everyone can love their work and working together. That kind of working environment allows a team to achieve astounding results collectively and to be at their best individually. As a leader, you don't have to choose between collective results and each person's individuality. In fact, you can't get one without the other. The strength of the team is the individual, and the strength of the individual is the team. As a leader, it's your responsibility to do what you can to prevent bias, prejudice, and bullying from destroying respect on your team. This may feel like trying to prevent the inevitable, given the prevalence of these attitudes and behaviors. That's why it's important that when these problems do occur, despite your best efforts, your job is to respond in a way that makes it less likely that they will happen again. If you are a leader from a historically disadvantaged group, this is going to be more difficult for you than if you're a leader from a historically advantaged group. That is part of what my colleague, Michelle, the Black woman who is the CEO of the company where I was giving the Radical Candor talk, was reminding me in the story from the introduction. I'll remind you of that story in a second, Ellen. You'll read more stories of how this plays out throughout this book. But no matter who you are, leadership is hard work. In my experience, too many leaders have acted as though creating a fair and equitable working environment was a distraction from their real job to get shit done. But more and more leaders are beginning to understand that they will have trouble getting shit done unless they first create a reasonable, inclusive working environment. All right, I'll stop there. Lay it on me. What do you think?
Wow. Okay.
I would first say that I like the growth of this. This is a system that you're putting in place to allow people to be accepted, and it's not just something you say, but it's a place that grows and adjusts with the employees, which is phenomenal because it's built into the structure. It's something that I think that jumps out to me. Ellen, you were going to say something?
I was processing and kind of soaking it all into how that would apply in our own organization and thinking about does this apply? How does it apply? So it was, I was like listening to the lecturer more than giving the lecturer opinions about how she can improve it. But okay, I'm going to put my radical candor hat on. So I love everything you said. I think my feedback would be like, how do I apply that? Like the
Yeah.
idea and the concept of it sounds very great. And yet at the same time, I'm almost like, how do I do that? Like, what is the path to attainability? Like, I'm so action oriented. I'm like, okay, so what's step one? Like, what do I need to do to create that? Do I need to have like an all hands and we talk about stuff? Like, what is the thing that
Oh, yeah.
how can
Yeah.
you
What are the
land to reality? Yeah, like great concept. Now give me something I can walk away with. And it's like my Kim Scott checklist. So I can actually go
Yes.
and apply this and not just feel like a dirtbag because I don't know how to apply this.
I don't know how to apply it either exactly, but here's 6 things. So in other words, the advice in this book is not going to solve all the world's problems, unfortunately. I wish I could claim. But I think there's some specific things that leaders can do that really can create a better working environment. And I'm going to give you the summary of the whole book. The first
Great.
thing that leaders can do is to create bias disruptors, to teach people when they notice, when they're having a conversation, to disrupt bias in the course of the meeting, to say bias alert, and then also to teach people how to take it, how to respond well when their bias has been pointed out, and to make this a real norm. This is uncomfortable. You got to embrace the discomfort and build stamina. So that's what leaders can do about bias. What leaders can do about prejudice is they can create a space for conversation so that they make it really clear where the line is between one person's freedom to think whatever they want, but they can't impose those thoughts or beliefs on others. So it's easy for me to say, make the line clear. It's hard for leaders to do it, but creating the kind of policies so that people can disrupt prejudice when they also can distinguish between bias and prejudice, because one is unconscious as I'm defining it, and the other is quite conscious. And then the third thing, I think, and there's more to say about all this, but leaders need to create consequences for bullying. So don't give good bonuses or promotions to people who bully, because if you reward that kind of behavior, you're going to get more of it. The
Yeah.
fourth thing that I recommend that leaders do is to sort of quantify bias in their management systems. Like, go out and proactively look. Why are some demographics underrepresented in our organization and others are over? And you don't want to, this is not a quota, but you do want to investigate. You want to use those numbers. You want to measure what matters. The fifth thing that I recommend that leaders do is to create checks and balances so that no one person in the organization, even the CEO or the founder, has too much power, so that people don't wind up getting bullied. And then the sixth thing that I recommend that leaders do is to create a culture of consent, to be really explicit, that if you want to touch someone, you need to be sure that they want to be touched in that way, even if it's just a handshake. And
Yeah.
if you're not sure, don't touch. And if you're too drunk to know, definitely don't touch. So
Right.
there's tons more to say about all that, but what do you think?
I think that's pretty good. I mean, I would, if I think to my own book, like there's little snippets in there where there's infographics and I have like
Yes.
checklist stuff. If you gave me something like that, I would like it even more, because probably what I would do is take a photo of it and then go to my head of people and say, hey, I really like this concept. Like, what can we do to implement this? And then it gives people a very like clean path to doing it. And then you can use that for social media and to promote that
Ooh,
one page of like action. Like, here's 5 things to
so
improve
good.
your business versus like, you might have bias. You're going to feel bad about this. What are you going to do? Like, that's a different
Yes.
approach. The same concept.
I love that. All right. I'm gonna make that one pager today. I'm not gonna wait till tomorrow. That's a really good
Yay.
suggestion.
But
Thank you.
dream first, details later, Kim Scott. By the way, I love saying your full name. It makes me think of like Michael Jordan, just like Kim Scott, full name.
Just don't use your middle name because then she's an assassin.
Wait, what's your middle
I'm
name, Kim?
Malone. Is Kim Malone
Oh,
Scott an assassin?
Well, if you think about you think of the people who kill presidents, they always have 3 names.
Oh, I see.
Have
I
you not
see.
heard that?
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah.
You
Then
get
I,
3
I
names.
have
James
Yes,
3
if you
names.
use
Earl
I'm
all 3
Ellen
names,
Marie
yeah,
Bennett.
then
I'm Ellen Marie Bennett. Yeah. Woo, dangerous.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
It's okay. So you could also there's some wonderful people with their 3 names too.
yes, yes.
Exactly. Thank you.
Horrible
All right.
stereotype that I'm perpetuating. I'm sorry.
We love your name. All right, so Ellen, lay a story on us. What is an experience in your career? And one of the things I did in Radical Respect is to try to break the book down into what we can do depending on what our role is. So sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the person who was harmed by bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, or physical violations. Sometimes you're the person who caused harm. That's probably the least comfortable place to be. And sometimes you're the upstander. Sometimes you observe this happening and hopefully you
Yeah.
intervene in some way.
Okay.
So do you have, I mean, I imagine you have plenty of stories about being on the
Yeah.
receiving end of this stuff, but you don't have to tell one of those if you don't feel like it.
Okay. I'll tell you a PG-13 story.
All right.
So there was somebody that I worked with a long time ago, like, oh my gosh, 9 years ago, something like that. It was the early days of Hedley and Bennett. And I really wanted to go to this conference overseas. It was in Asia. And it was like a congregation of every vendor you could possibly think of, factories, suppliers, fabric, etc. It was like a giant textile show. And I felt really strongly that I wanted to go to that, and I was going to go do that. And anyway, that's just like setting the scene. That's where I was headed.
Yeah.
And this person that had a lot of like 40 years of experience in the textile industry was helping us. And he was like kind of like a consultant, if you will. And he basically like tore me to shreds when we decided to not work together anymore. And I vividly recall sitting on the plane headed to China, like in between two people, coach, middle seat.
Yeah.
You know, I think it was literally like the emergency row. So you couldn't even sit backward. Like you couldn't even push the seat back. It was not great. And he's just like reaming me on the phone about how I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to drive this thing into the ground. Like I should just listen to what he's saying. And I have no appreciation for what he's doing and all of his years of wisdom and whatever. Anyway, I just sat there in between these two people, just sobbing while having this guy like ream me on the phone. I was like 26 years old. And it was so brutal. And it's like just sewn into my soul a little bit, that moment. And it felt so terrible because he was so much more experienced than I was. I didn't know what I was doing. I probably shouldn't have been going to that textile show, but like the textile show wasn't the point of it. The point of it was that he was just like, you don't know what you're doing. You're a dumb little girl, and I'm going to show you how you can't do this without me, and I'm going to go. And I was like, I really want you to keep working with me, and like we really need your help. But the truth is, like, we were able to move on and we figured it out, and we obviously evolved and grew and transported ourselves from that place to a much bigger, better place now. But that moment was really hard. It was really hard for me because it was definitely like a deeply emotional
upsetting.
Place in the middle of the plane with people right next to you that feels so uncomfortable, watching and hearing me just like crying, apologizing to this man on the phone who's just like ripping into me,
bullying you.
Bullying. Yeah. So that was the story.
And so why do you think he felt so free to talk to you that way, to bully? Do you think that he treated everyone that way, or did he feel free to treat you that way because you were younger, or because you're a woman, or because some other reason? Like, why do you think that he...
Yeah, I think I was definitely very confident for my age and for my experience, but it was out of just like sheer need to survive. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure this out. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Fine. We're gonna work
Yeah.
on it. We're
I'll
gonna
figure it
we're
out.
gonna
Yeah.
conquer our way. Like that was the only I built the table I sat at. So I had to, push myself into those positions that were deeply uncomfortable, but I couldn't do it other than just proving to myself and to others that I belonged. And I don't
Yeah.
know that he really loved that, especially coming from like 40 years in the textile industry, which is like mainly male driven and very
Yeah.
like we're in charge and we're old school. And I think like I later found out then he got a divorce. Like there was just stuff that was happening on his end that I think back to, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you were having a lot of your own issues, and you're probably like, how is this young, annoying whippersnapper like succeeding in some random little thing that she wants to make, and then it's actually like working? Like, why her and why not me? Like that, I guess, is kind of what it came down to. And I also like I can totally look back at it and say with honesty that like I probably wasn't a great partner to him as the person contracting him to help me. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a little kid doing this, and I didn't have all the answers, and maybe sometimes I thought I did. And I was, as my husband likes to remind me, I was like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I hadn't been like scathed and damaged by life yet. Like nothing had happened.
Right.
Everything was just like epically optimistic. Um and so I was probably like annoyingly optimistic to him too.
But on the other hand, he was working for you, and it was
Totally.
your job to be optimistic, you
Yeah,
know?
no, exactly. 100%. And I definitely have to remind myself of that through the years. It's not the first, or probably won't be the last time that something like that occurs along the way. And it's like it sucks, but that is the reality of growing and evolving an organization. Like you're working with human beings and you're a human too. And so we all have
Yeah.
like shit we're dealing with, and you don't know how much
Yeah.
stuff that person in front of you is dealing with on a daily basis. So like just having a bit of grace and understanding of that. Like I feel like my perspective on it has shifted so much since I had a kid, because now I really
Yeah.
have like a whole other vantage point of what it means to juggle and to struggle with things. And I think about employees that had kids before I did, and like I had no
Yeah.
idea what it meant to like have to go do pickup or drop off, or your nanny didn't show up, or your babysitter cut out. Like your life just got flipped upside down, and everything you were going to do was almost impossible to happen. And like there's more grace and understanding in me now because I've lived it.
I gotta say that having a kid really leans into that. Being able to adjust when like there's a cancellation or kid is sick, or you need to make sure that they get to something that they need to get to, but also in the same kind of humility as we all need as people, that kids will ask the straightforward questions of why
Yes.
are things this way, or why can't I do that, or why
Right.
why do I need to sit still in this place? To kind of questioning some of the structures that we kind of put on different people. And I think that your ability to tap into questioning the status quo, or just figuring things out, or doing what makes sense, is something that goes hand in hand with parenthood. And I think that's one of the things that we lose, especially as kids get older, but as we get older ourselves, that
Yeah,
we forget to question the things that we're told are the right way of doing things, or the
totally.
formal way, or the way to be, or the avenues for success.
And
And
ironically, like innovation happens when you question the status quo.
mhm.
Like when you lean into, wait a second, are you sure? Why don't we try it this way? Like I took a very stale category of aprons and I turned it into an entire world that now like does collaborations with Crocs and Vans and Madewell. Like you could have never kind of pictured that at the beginning, but yeah, we did that because we were like, no, we're not satisfied with what exists there.
Yeah, and it's just to dovetails. I drop a lot of books because I read a lot of books,
Yeah.
and so I'm dropping this book that I read called Power for All a few weeks ago, and it
Mm.
reminded me of what you're saying about that person on the phone telling you you won't be successful, but then later it's coming out that this person had a divorce, and how there's different forms of power, and one of the forms of power is to um, to reduce other people's choices, is how you gain power for yourself.
Oh, wow.
Another is to make sure that you consolidate power by making sure you have alliances in order to like sway people's judgment and stuff like that. But there's like different forms
Mhm.
of power, and it's amazing to me that he treated you that way. At the same time, it seems as though power was slipping away from him in one part of his life. And I'm wondering if he tried to assert himself more, because as you yourself were coming into your own knowledge or your own way of doing things, that influence, that lack of influence, I guess, was slipping away
Right.
from him. So he had to try to reassert his power in that way in order to feel some sort of security if he's looking at his power balance in his checking
Yep.
account and it's going down. And so it's unfortunate that you were on the other side of the line when he was going through that. But I'm also like proud of you for not acquiescing and holding your ground there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And I mean, the other thing I admire about your story, Ellen, is that you were able to, uh, at least in retrospect, have some compassion for him. Like he was going through a hard time. He was going through a divorce. Like maybe that's why he was behaving the way he
Yeah.
was. And I think sometimes having when I'm getting bullied, if I sort of assume, oh, the problem is this person is, or so and so, then I get madder,
Mhm.
and then I'm more impacted by their behavior. But if I can like take a step back and try to think like, what's going on for you here? That's one of the things we actually recommend that you say when you're being bullied is a you statement. Like, why are you talking to me like this?
Mm.
I think
Just to kind of get
is
them to reflect on what they're doing.
Yeah, and also just to kind of push them away a little bit, like
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. No, that makes
um,
sense. That makes sense.
if that were to happen to you today, what would A, it probably wouldn't because it would be a stupid thing to say, you obviously do know what you're doing, but, that doesn't mean that people won't say stupid things, like, how would you respond if it were happening to you today?
Honestly, if somebody was saying things of that nature, I would just try to like separate myself from them because whatever is
Yeah,
happening is there's no like winning from that. Like it just doesn't it's a lose-lose for all parties. And if
yeah,
they're talking to me that way, if I'm talking to them that way, like the whatever bridge is broken and we just need to like move forward and there's something negative about whatever that is. But I yeah, I think like my own journey and evolution in being a leader has been one where I've failed many times and done things not the right way many, many times and like have learned by like getting back up, bleeding and being like, yeah, I messed that one up and then
yeah,
trying again. So like with each one of those times, I think I'm also like giving myself like this bucket of empathy that I can like dish out at times when needed. Like I had this terrible situation happen in my company where we had signed a lease with someone in our, I don't know if you remember this from the book, in Dream First Details Later, but like I signed the lease of my building with someone else and we would pay them rent. And then one day we got served an eviction notice and he ran off with all the rent and we had to pay it back. And like I had no money
ah,
uh, saved. And so I had to take all of the money from inventory for holiday and use that to be able to like pay the back pay on the months of rent. And it was like a
oh my
devastating
gosh.
situation. But I later found out that that man was going through bankruptcy and I think he was also going through a divorce. Like his whole life was crumbling around him and he had been in business for 40
Mhm.
something years. So it wasn't just like overnight, it was like this slow trickling build.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful that I did it anyway with him, that we signed that lease because then I got the building after. They gave me the full lease and I wouldn't have been able to get the full lease if I hadn't signed the lease with him in the first place because I was too young, I was
yeah,
too whatever, like they didn't want to give it to a 27-year-old this like 16,000 square foot building, but yet I got it after that circumstance. So he helped me push forward even though he also dragged me like 12 steps back and caused me a lot of
ugh,
headache, heartache, but like that's kind of how I try to think about circumstances like that. Like it feels horrible in the moment and you feel like the world is caving in on you. And I very frequently feel that way. And then
Yeah.
after a month goes by, I look back and I'm like, holy crap, like what an epically fantastic circumstance and a gift that you had that happen to you. And now that's done. And like, you don't need to be in contact with that person, or like that situation is over and you learned all these different things. So it's, yeah, that's kind of how I like navigate these things.
I love the resilience, and like finding the silver lining. That's a huge part of being an entrepreneur, is pushing through and making it work, even when it seems like a catastrophe.
It sounds like the thing to do, like before you enter any business arrangement or hire a consultant, make sure you question whether or not they're going through a divorce first. Sounds like from looking at your stories.
Yeah, the divorce thing is really real. God.
Yeah. People are not at their best, but it's also good to extend people a little grace when they're going through a personal situation. Well, thank you so much. I always love talking to you, Ellen. I admire the company you've built. I admire the way you've built it, and I love the book you've written. So thank you so much. Really fun talking.
Thanks for having me, and for everyone listening, come follow us on Hedley and Bennett and Ellen Marie Bennett on Instagram, and go to our website, hedleyandbennett.com, so that your kitchen can be way better than it is today. I promise you have a dull knife in your drawers. Guaranteed. I'll help you fix that.
And the aprons are so beautiful. It's all beautiful. If you're going to cook,
yeah, come join our world. Thanks for having me, Kim and Wesley. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And if you would like to join us as well, please email us at hello@justworktogether.com. And if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or another podcatcher, please give us a rating and a review so we know how we're doing. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.